Good afternoon and welcome to the first of a three-part series brought to you by City.AI Orange County. This is our chapter's second event, and we are very happy to see all of you, albeit virtually this time. Little background on City.AI Global. Since its inception about 3 years ago, the organization has engaged over 26,000 AI industry professionals, as well as 200 ambassadors worldwide. Before we get started, we'd like to take a moment to thank all of our ambassadors here for their help in putting this series together for you, as well as our diamond sponsor, Technosis, who was instrumental in bringing City.AI to Orange County. Now, we expect this to be a highly interactive discussion featuring 3 distinguished business and technology leaders, each of whom has a unique perspective on AI and contactless AI and what that means to us. Joining us to talk about the topic and the challenges and opportunities that are available in this space are Al Brown, Senior Vice President of Engineering, Data Science, and Architecture for Veritone; Joseph K. Hopkins, Thought Leader in AI, Authentication, and Security Technologies, and he's also the pioneer behind the iPrestige Emerge Fund. And finally, we have Martin Prescher. He is the founder and managing director of PwC's Consumer Finance Innovation Center. He also has his PhD in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So with that, I'm going to ask you, Doctor, to get this thing started. Martin, let's talk about contactless AI in the context of our world today. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, thank you, Sam, and very happy to be here. Obviously in great company here on the panel. Yeah, I think with the crisis, roaring through the country or the world actually in the last couple of months, I think it really uncovered a lot of the digital shortcomings that I think we have as a society. So when it comes to contactless technologies, it's also interesting to think about the virus itself and contact tracing and these things. And one thing that I think is important when it comes to the question of returning to work and starting our lives again, right, is the question of who did we make contact with, right? So and in Germany, for example, I just wanted to point that out here. For a while, there has now been a Corona app, what it's called, right? So an app that traces your contacts, but it does it in a very interesting way, trying to preserve your privacy. So this app was supported outspokenly by data privacy activists, because it finds a way to make these decisions about your contacts and your exposure to the virus and so on. It makes those decisions locally on your phone. It doesn't share any of your data with the server. So this is the other area of AI that I think is interesting, next to the general decision making in this very complex stakeholder situation to enable digital transactions. The other interesting area is, can we make decisions in a distributed way, right? So that you don't have a central server that makes the decision, which opens it up to hacking and whatnot, right? And gives power to whoever is running that server. The idea is, can you decentralize these things? And I think AI plays a huge role in that too, given that devices like this have a higher compute power than most desktop computers like 5 years ago.
So interesting. You mentioned the more, and I'm going to jump in. I wanted to ask you about that, because what I keyed on that was that the privacy folks were okay with that. So tell me more about that. What was it that they were supporting that they felt comfortable with? Because as you know, this is a big topic here, obviously in the States, and we're hearing a lot about it in California, a lot more. And I know Joseph can speak to this as well, heavy privacy issues. You're telling us that this app for the contact tracing was accepted and supported by folks in Germany on that side of the fence?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
And the main aspects of it being that it is not mandatory to use, right? So that is another important aspect, right? So the question is, what do you do with the information that you have been exposed to the virus, right? Do you make that mandatory, right? And that's obviously politically very hot water, right? So what do you do with that? So it's non-mandatory to use, but it is what is striking about the privacy about it is that the phone itself doesn't share any of your private information with any server, right? So no device IDs, no phone numbers, no locations even, right? So the only thing the phone shares with other phones via Bluetooth, right, is some cryptic hash that, you know, the phones pretty much just keep track of who did I meet, right? Which phone did I meet? And then whenever you use the app and say, hey, I've been tested positively, then your phone traces back which phones have I been in contact with, and then all these phones are told so, right? Are informed about this. That means there is no way to trace back an individual device to the person, right? There's no linkage between the two, and that makes it inherently safe, right?
Interesting, interesting. So the idea being to decentralize it and have it localized on your phone.
Correct. Your phone
Nothing
at
is
the
stored.
end, the phone at the end makes the decision of who did I meet, right?
Okay, and hence that's the AI component to it. I mean, I know we talk a
Yeah,
lot
I mean,
about contactless. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, AI obviously is a broad term, and I would love to open that up to the panel, of course, right? I mean, because, you know, AI is, you know, starts with very simple decision making and rules, right, all the way to real prediction capabilities and you know, things like self-driving cars, you know, which are obviously something way more advanced. So I wouldn't necessarily say this is AI in the sense of like an intelligent decision making, but what I find interesting about AI in general is the data side, right? So who owns the data? How is data kept private? And how are decisions made, right? Is that a central agency, you know, that has all the data and makes decisions, or is there a way to do this in a more private and secure way? And at the end, you know, something that's almost, you know, driven by the network.
COVID has really opened up this, and I think it's actually provided another angle to this big concern about privacy, right, and data rights, because effectively we're dealing with a public health issue, right? And part of managing public health is that you've got to be able to disclose information in order to be able to provide others with the information so they can protect themselves. So this has in fact opened up, I think, an additional debate regarding what should be disclosed, what should not be disclosed. And we can get into this later, but I was thinking about the call earlier today, and one of the things that I think about as this growing issue regarding big data, right, is that people are still generally concerned, right, that the powers to be, they continue to use data for the purpose of watching, listening, and controlling folks, and dispatching that information from a surveillance purpose, you know, to various parties without permission. So there's a debate here, right, in terms of which, you know, where is the balance? And I think COVID has actually provided, you know, some additional complexities to that.
How are businesses limiting liability using the technology solutions that are available right now?
When you look at companies trying to reduce liability, they're really trying to make sure that they are doing everything they can to keep their people and their customers safe, so that they don't get it, that they're not spreading it, that they're being good citizens. And to that end, AI can help us a lot. For example, there are companies out there that are starting to use AI to measure social distancing. So how close are people together? And if there are, let's start flagging it as alerts so that somebody in the building or facility can be aware and can actually help keep people safe. Same thing for whether or not people are wearing masks or PPE detection, temperature checks. We also have seen cleanliness for different AI. An example of some of these actually is Actuate.ai based in New York City. So through all of these different approaches, companies are really reinventing and reimagining how to do business under COVID and actually how to be the best citizens so that people don't get sick. But the main thing is just being it's not being cautious, but being open to changing the way we work. So I think everyone's gotten really good at Zoom and various networking technologies that we have today. I think we're actually probably more effective now, all working remote. We don't have to commute into the office. But what I would really focus on is just look at the ways AI can help you. I go back to even what Martin said about COVID tracking. So how do you actually use AI to figure out my personal risk or your employee's personal risk, and actually have the models that some companies are building right now to determine how much at risk you are of COVID, and whether or not, if you're at high risk, should you actually come back into a shared space type of thing. As well as to other things, let's use AI to automate some of the tasks that we have around the office or even the home or the schools to keep everybody safe in terms of enforcing some of the new rules we have under COVID.
That's great. That's fantastic. And Joseph, I think this is a natural lead into you. You know, there are a lot of talented individuals and companies like Al's that are working on some of these solutions right now. As an investor, obviously, you probably have a thesis in mind, and you've got a focus on how you're evaluating opportunities. Tell us a little bit about that, and what are you looking at right now in this space?
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, I sort of manage two companies. One is more on the advisory side. So think about some of the things that Martin does at PwC. I actually come from KPMG. So definitely used to his world. So one is on the advisory side, and also we do IP valuation. And then on the fund side is where we literally look for companies that are kind of operating in our sweet spot. So our sweet spot from a technology play is literally in fairly broad, but still specifically three areas. So one is advanced encryption. We all kind of know what encryption is, the stuff that we've been using, been around for 40 years. And so there's a bunch of stuff that's coming out given the advent of quantum computers that people are getting excited about. The other one is around authentication. And AI is becoming huge in this as well. So using AI to, when you go and engage with your system, where a device, your computer, you can use AI to actually have power for that device to actually know you are who you say you are, right? And then lastly, the other one is basically big data. And that's largely around not just managing big data from an efficiency perspective, but also making sure that we can deal with some of these ownerships and privacy type issues. So those are the areas that we play in. And so companies that are in those kinds of sweet spots, we get really excited for. And obviously COVID sort of threw a wrench in all of this, right? Because obviously if you're a small and medium-sized tech company, you likely are probably relying on guys like me or others for money, whether VC or investment money. You could be engaging in some debt, and you probably have some cash flow challenges. That's just the nature of the beast, right? And so, and one of the things that we're doing to try to deal with some of the challenges we're all faced with today, one of the things my company we're doing, we started up this new program that provides funds for companies to help them sort of get over the hump from a milestone perspective. So you hit sort of milestones from an operational excellence perspective, and we will actually provide funds into your company. It could be equity, could be debt, but it becomes critical from a cash flow sort of perspective, and it helps people sort of over the hump, particularly during some of these tough periods. And of course, people who believe in what we're doing around trying to make the world a better place from a technology next gen perspective can also invest in our fund as well. But look, we get pretty excited when we have a chance to deal with some of these really smart companies on the technology play, because these guys not only do they have the vision to coming up with this really cool ideas that they can ultimately flip into intellectual property, but they know that in order to give the intellectual property legs, you've got to be able to power that with technology. And when you power it with technology, that's where you get the whole economic benefit. And so oftentimes you have the vision. We want to make sure they have good IP, because if you don't protect your ideas, someone else will get them from you for sure. But we also want to make sure that you can get the technologies that you need. That's going to take capital to move that along. But then we want to make sure that we can get you into the marketplace from a go-to-market strategy execution perspective. And not shocking enough, but oftentimes the people who have these cool ideas and develop the technology and the IP, they're not necessarily people who are going to be able to power the company into the marketplace. So we will help these folks on the advisory side to really power them into the marketplace to ensure that they can become quite successful beyond proof of concept to where they can get into a revenue play, et cetera. So anyway, that's what we're doing from both the funding and advisory perspective.
Fantastic, Joseph. Now you mentioned something. Obviously, you're looking at IP, and I was wondering, are you looking at anything in, COVID? I think, depending on who you talk to, people are going to say, gosh, my entire life has changed, or, there's tremendous opportunity. As we all know, opportunities exist in people and in things that happen. And, no doubt you are scouring the marketplace. Any interesting IP that you can kind of share, at least at a high level, that you're seeing out there that might touch on what we're talking about?
Yeah. It's interesting. We try to focus on IP we target, because we'll actually try our car ourselves if it's the right space for us. I think some of the fun stuff is stuff that some of the characteristics about what I call this next generational technology that's going to help people maneuver through the uncertain times. So think about stuff like, protecting one's privacy. How about trust? How about doing things that are more convenient? How about safety first, given COVID, right? How about enhancing security? So things that we get excited about from an IP perspective is like quantum computers, advanced encryption, contactless authentication, where I can tap into my phone without actually having to enter a password because it knows who I am by just how I move the phone itself, right? Think about what's called tap and go payments system. So when you actually can process a payment with never having to hand someone your credit card, never having to tap that credit card on a machine to process a payment. Europe is so far ahead of us. I don't know why, but they are so far ahead of the US than we are in this big guard. And then the last one, of course, I think is big data. How do you take technology to manage big data and do it in a way to where you can preserve privacy and ownership of the people who created the data in the first place?
Love that. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the bigger issues that technology and business leaders are wrestling with as it relates to the implementation of contactless technology. Martin, you had some great examples that you kicked it off with. Tell us a little bit about that. What are you seeing some of the big issues?
Yeah, listening, Joseph, to what you were saying, this is exactly what we're, you're talking about, the IP that relates very well to the problems or pain points we're seeing in the market, right? So that's sort of, in my role, that's how I look at the world, right? I see what we would love to do as consumers and what we think, are necessary, from a societal perspective. And then now I see how my clients, banks and lenders and the like, why it is hard to do these things and implement these things, right? And so that translates into interesting innovation areas, right? And one is identification, obviously, right? And authentication. So one of the reasons why Al had to have somebody come to his house for his refinancing, right, was because, well, there's technology available to do online authentication and identification, right? There's technology where you can, scan your driver's license, including the hologram, to make sure it's not a fake license. On your phone, all of us have fingerprint scanners, right? Face ID. So, the technology is there. And it's already deployed, right? Because everybody has a phone, right? So it's not the availability of the technology. It's really how you integrate this technology in the workflows and the processes, right? In the finance space, let's pick that one. And that's really where the crux is, right? It's about changing the way things are conducted, right? How you close a loan, how you close a payment and all that, right? That the processes are the problem, right? And many technologies would already enable that end-to-end, the closing of transactions like that, right? Authentication being one. There's OCR technology, of course, to scan documents, whatever you want to do. You have people take pictures of documents and then have a machine read it in and, make decisions based on that. You have big data technology to pull in all kinds of interesting or important data sources, to make credit decisions or whatever you want. So it's really not the availability of the technology, it's the flexibility of the process that makes it hard. And COVID was really interesting in one aspect, among many others, but one was that companies had to, or processes had to now use different data sources than they used to, right? So when you make a credit decision, you normally use the FICO score and some other scores, some other ways to determine what is the default probability of that person for that loan, right? Now with COVID, things have changed, right? So you might need different credit models, right? Unemployment has shifted, right? And a lot of people have, of course, become unemployed. And this flexibility to react to these changing environments, changing needs for data, and end-to-end digital workflows, that's really where we have a problem, right? We are not flexible in our system to make these changes quickly. And there's obviously a lot of aspects that play into that, regulation being one, right? I mean, it's in the car industry, as I said, a lot of people say, hey, why can't you do online car purchase transactions tomorrow? And I say, sure, from a technology perspective, that's possible, but there's actually laws that make it unlawful, right? In many states, you need a wet signature. It's state laws. You go, I mean, I don't know if you go to jail, but it's not allowed, right, to do that. And so there's many things we have to change, right, to really enable these things. Technology being a very important one. And I think in the last couple of years, very, very cool things have developed. And I know that all my clients are looking at new technology. So people are aware, but we have to work on the processes and the modernization of how these transactions work, right? And how, as from a regulatory perspective, from a corporate perspective, and from a consumer perspective, all these things have to come together to really bring this to life at the end of the day.
So to that point, it was funny, Joseph had sent me an article in advance of our talk today talking about what they're doing right now in Sweden. And that is they are implanting a chip the size of a grain of rice on a person and making it so that they can pay with just the wave of their hand. Sounds interesting. Do you guys think that's a possibility here in the States? I mean, beyond just the regulatory piece, do you think culturally or consumers would accept something like that?
So let me qualify first. I'm not advocating it at all.
I know you're not. You were just sharing.
I just want to share. So
yeah,
I'd love to get Martin and Al's thoughts on this.
Sure. So I think it's interesting. I was aware of this a few years ago. They did this at a club in Ibiza, so people could hang out at the pool and really just wave that little RFID chip and actually pay for things. So it has been around for a bit. I'm personally not so much in favor. Veritone's always been an AI first company, so we've been choosing different ways to do things like that. Mm-hmm. So for example, we just actually announced, still kind of in a beta mode, but on our veritone.com site, you can log in actually through a voice fingerprint as well as a face fingerprint. So you can actually enroll, you can sign up, and then your own self is your own identity. We don't actually need the RFID chip. We did the same thing for security of getting into our building, so our facility. So for pretty much the exec staff and some of the tech staff, you can actually walk in, it will recognize you, it'll change the ambient color behind our logo on the wall. So if everybody is authorized, then it's green. If it's somebody's not authorized, it's red. And then if it's green, it'll open the doors to let you walk in. So we are doing things like that as an alternative to actually embedding RFID chips into our hands or arms.
And how's that working? Are people okay with that? That idea that they might be red or green at any given time, depending on which door they're in front of?
It could be. Generally, we're not mandating that people enroll. So this is all self-enrollment. And if they want to do this, they can. Otherwise, they're able to still use the HID card to badge in and go forward.
Martin, do you have anything to add to that?
The key of it is that it's not mandatory, right? I mean, I think that's important. And I find it important, to really stress the data privacy about these topics, right? And what I also think though is that data is something that when I talk about the Corona app, you can make decisions without using actual personal information, right? And that's what I really like about these decentralized decision-making systems, where you sort of move away from this idea of storing data in a central place, which is vulnerable, right? And having black box AI models work on that data, to a situation where you push a lot of the decision making into the edge, right? So meaning the actual devices, and in many applications that has vast advantages, right? Speed, privacy, and obviously with the compute power and the cloud, having become extremely sophisticated, you can make these systems work.
I think as AI advances, because remember, AI, hopefully it's going to be less invasive to what Al was saying than that, right? AI is about learning from data, right? And so the more I think it learns from data, it picks up behaviors, it can sense temperatures. It's a much more user-friendly way of managing things, and even more of a private, user-friendly way in future than putting a chip in someone's body. But I still necessarily I still can actually see a future where people are starting to have chips in their bodies for all kinds of reasons. I can see this actually. Ironically, and maybe to this note, I have a client by which I'm actually doing an IP evaluation project right now for this client. And believe it or not, to keep it in a very, very simplistic way, this client has IP that effectively puts an iPhone in one's eye. So it literally, and it's a sort of a blocking pattern, but basically what it does, it has think about a light that goes through the eye lens that actually hits the ocular part of the eye, and that ocular part of the eye can actually interpret the meaning of the light and send back output of that. So, and they have functional ways to be able to control it based on the movement and temperature of the person's body, of how to actually manage all of that. It's the most fascinating thing I've seen. And so this notion of actually implanting a device, a very, very miniature device, if they can get around the temperature, some of the temperature issues there, in someone's eye for the purpose of them managing data in quite a private way is really interesting unto itself. But these are the things that these pioneers of technology from a next-gen perspective are working on. Right?
Wow, interesting. I mean, just out of curiosity, what does that market, in your opinion, look like, Joseph? I mean, right now you're at top level. I know you haven't done a deep dive on this particular organization, but just out of curiosity, obviously it's piqued your interest for a good reason.
So there is a broader market right now, right? So you think about you've seen like these virtual reality headsets that people wear, right? I'm sure Al, you guys probably played in some of that space. How about like these virtual wearable devices like glasses? Google plays in this space, Microsoft plays in space, Samsung, a bunch of companies that play in this space. But to actually take that technology to where you don't necessarily have to put something physical on your body because it now resides in your body, it's really amazing from a variety of different avenues. And it could potentially, if this technology worked, it could potentially transform that market in a way that the people who created the wearable devices never thought of. Because whoever really thought about actually literally implanting a smartphone type device in one's eye and to be able to manage it from there. It's really amazing stuff. So it actually could have an impact on the wearable devices as we would know it relative to, the market is called intraocular lens market is what it's called. So there's wearable, and then there's this new stuff that I'm now touching that really doesn't exist today that we hope maybe will in future.
And if I might chime in there, this is the whole discussion about wearables. I find really interesting when it comes to the contactless piece here, right? Because I worked at Siemens for a long time, and we back in the 2000s we already looked at using wearables for service, for professional. I mean, for repair and service, use cases, right? So the problem statement is, you as a repairman, of a gas turbine or a device like that, you always have to have plans, right? So you have to look up parts, you have to look up, specific procedures and so on. That means you have to hold them in your hand, but at the same time, you need to engage with the device, right, with both hands, and actually to perform the repair. And so to have a hands-free situation is extremely important to optimize these processes. And so there's helmets, that we already had in the 2000s for the repair personnel to look up, drawings, to look up part descriptions or processes and stuff like that. And Google Glass, for example, are these wearables, that are way smaller, have already been used for a couple of years now for that same use case, right? So to enable somebody to work with their hands free and being able to control with your eyes or with voice commands or even gestures what you want to see, pull up a drawing or something like that. I think that's it's interesting that in the consumer space, the wearables have not caught on at all, right? And Google Glass, as we all know, stopped pushing the device to consumers. In the commercial space, I think it looks a little different. I think wearables are a really interesting area for that reason. You can optimize processes very well in order by enabling somebody to use both hands and do all these lookups of things in a way more efficient way. And I hope that there's going to be some revival in the consumer space as well, honestly.
How do you think we are positioned for innovations in this space, in your opinion? How's it looking for us in SoCal in terms of the development and implementation of solutions that are in this contactless AI space?
I honestly think that Orange County is home to a lot of smart people, and especially experienced people, right? I think there is a big community here of people that have had success with companies, right? And therefore are experienced entrepreneurs. There's a lot of big companies here in Orange County that a lot of us don't have on their map, right? And we don't have the Apple headquarters here, right? But especially in my space, we have a lot of finance companies here, right? So I think we have an interesting ecosystem of entrepreneurs, of large companies, and then on the engineering or technology side, I think we have a lot of people have realized that the Bay Area, for example, is challenging place to live, right? And Orange County I think has become for a couple of years now a really interesting area for especially young families to move to. So I think we also have a very good baseline of technology, technologically skilled people here and engineers. So I think we put together a lot of the pieces. And one thing that we can do better in Orange County is, I believe, that bringing these together, right? That is something that Silicon Valley, I think, is still number one in the world, probably, is in bringing these things together in a very casual and easy way, right? And in Orange County, a lot is going on, but it always requires somebody like you, Sam, here, for example, right? Of setting these things up and bringing people together. And I think that's something that as a community, we need to do better.
I echo what Martin shared. We have a lot of really very interesting startups, especially around the computer vision space, which I'm pretty close to. We have a lot of great technology companies. We have a lot of people that have done pretty amazing things throughout their careers, including on the phone with us today. And I think Orange County is really great in terms of we have all the raw materials we need. What we need more and what we can do better is really pushing the companies that are here to help us fund and push the innovation of these concepts and use them. The other thing I just think that Orange County has going for us is that our environment here is just so amazing. You can do things outside if you want to be active. You have the whole active side that you can innovate around. You can innovate around inside of businesses. That is really a huge benefit that I don't think really any other place around the world has. So combined with the people and the companies and the environment, I think we're in a good place to actually provide some really cool, interesting technologies.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with everything I've heard. Look, when you got brain power like Martin when it comes to AI, he's based, I believe, in South Orange County. And we've got wonderful services, professional service organizations like Technosis, and then obviously what you guys are doing, Al at Veritone. These are phenomenal companies. And I think that it's the kind of engine and momentum we need to kind of get things going. If you recall, Samantha, when we first started, the charter here of City.AI, we did it because we believe that there's enough energy here to kind of get this really moving along. And people are looking at South Orange County, and maybe more specifically Irvine, right, to being maybe the next technology hub right? So thank goodness for Silicon Valley, and that right now, you're right, Martin, they are the lead for sure. But I think over time, I think you're going to see more here. You know, it's interesting. One of the areas I specialize in, I noticed you guys, is advanced encryption. So this is around when you take quantum computers and try to apply it, the algorithms, when you try to take quantum computers and try to break the algorithms of what's called a post-quantum algorithm or cryptography, it won't break it, right? Whereas with legacy stuff today, it will. When you look at the companies that's pulling that forward, that's probably about 45, maybe 48 companies globally that are viewed as the future contributors to post-quantum cryptography, if not quantum cryptography. Of that group, probably 10% of those companies are actually based in Orange County.
Wow. 10%
of those companies. And I have a pleasure working with probably half of them. So actually a little more than that. So so look, Orange County, we got a lot of things going on. And, you know, we got the great Neil Shahodo. He lives in South Orange County. He's considered one of the gurus of you know, Martin, of AI, right? Started the whole IBM Watson group. So look, this is a great place. I'm excited for it, and I'm happy to just play a little bit of a role in moving things along here.
Well, and thank you, by the way, Joseph. This is credit to you, by the way. This was your idea to put on this series because of all the interesting technologies you were starting to see in contactless AI, and thank you for driving this, and thank you, Martin and Al, for participating. These are 3 of our ambassadors, folks. 3 of the 7, I believe, that we have representing City.AI Orange County. So really special thanks to you guys for taking the time out today, and thanks to all of those who were able to join us. We look forward to taking a little bit of a deeper dive next month. We're going to be exploring actual companies that are doing things in the contactless AI space. And then the following month, we're hoping to have potentially a hybrid event where we could do some kind of live and online demonstrations and conversations with companies that are really making a huge difference and leapfrogging this in terms of incredible innovation. So again, thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next month.